Video got 500 million views in impressions alone. Within the first 72 hours, Tim Walz was posting about his cat at a fire at his house.
What about the mayor? The one that was in cahoots with the Somalian guy?
I haven't heard anything from him. Nothing. Like, all they have to do is just, like, simply say, all right, we're gonna pause the fraud, we're gonna stop it. Tim Walz just keeps blaming Trump for the fraud. Video got 500 to show you're a legitimate business before receiving money. What they're doing right now, by them freezing all that funding, amazing. Why didn't they do that before? They should show that they're a legit business before they receive the money.
Who decided to freeze it?
The HHS.
So it was not Tim Walz?
Not Tim Walz. My favorite new hobby is ratioing Tim Walz on Twitter.
While a lot of Americans can't afford the cost of childcare, they want to take the very programs that we use to make childcare more affordable and give them to fraudsters who are illegally in our country to begin with. These are not politicians who care about you. They care about keeping the fraud going.
You view your role as supporting agencies.
You get tips and complaints, whistleblowers or others come to you and tell you something's not right at these child care centers in your state that are getting all kinds of taxpayer money. Is that right? That's how it started?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you go and do your work. You got 28 years experience investigating things, and specifically in the crime and financial fraud area. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you go out and find out at these child care centers, there aren't any kids. No kids are there. I mean, there's some, but there's like, you don't see the playground. You don't see any kids at a place where they're supposed to be helping children. And then you also find out most of them are run by Somali individuals. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And then you make some recommendations. You said, here's what we should do. I think you put this on page 2 of your testimony. You said there's some basic things you should do. No, you said they didn't have biometric attendance system. They should do that. They should have electronic submission requirements. They need security cameras. You made some recommendations.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Nothing.
They ignored your recommendations, but it didn't stop there, did it? They ignored your recommendations. They called you a racist, right?
Correct.
Typical left. I always say the left will tell a lie. Big media will report it. You tell the truth. They call you a racist. Exactly what happened here. So they ignore your recommendations. They call you a racist, but it even got worse than that. You can imagine. They started investigating you. Is that right?
Yes, we were interviewed by an outside firm for a report given to the Office of Legislative Auditor.
What did that report look like? What did they say? They call you a racist? What did the report say?
The report basically questioned our investigative tactics, looked at how our unit was managed.
Even though you had 28 years experience in this particular area, tips and whistleblowers came to you, even though that was the whole catalyst for doing this.
Correct.
You get tips and complaints, whistleblowers.
Not to mention, Ilhan Omar was also the sponsor of the 2020 Meals Act, legislation passed during the pandemic that loosened oversight on federal child nutrition programs. And here she is promoting the Safari restaurant, who was later caught up in the Feeding Our Future fraud scandal.
aadaan ugu faraxsanahay in maanta Safari aan soo gaarnay sida dadka badan ay u og yihiin ciyaalkeena yaryar ilaa iyo number la eg 20 milyan oo ciyaal iskuuley ah waxay cuntadooda ka helaan iskoolka kaliya marka waxaan fursad u helnay in aan sharci.
To mention, Ilhan Omar was also the sponsor of the 2020
New developments, the fraud scandal in Minnesota escalating over the weekend. Both Treasury.
Critics are also asking why Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's husband reported. Ilhan Omar's husband reportedly purged. So how did her wealth explode after she became this?
In this video.
Everything in creation is.
How did her wealth explode after she became this lawmaker? Earlier this year, she denied being a millionaire.
Yeah.
She posted on X that she barely
Trump
has
to pull CBP out of protest.
CBP, what's that?
I don't know, but you can look it up.
CBP out of protest.
Another day, another lying headline about millions of dollars that apparently I have.
I gotta put the fucking video. I'm like, yeah, bitch, hold on, let me put this video together myself.
What do the hearty meatballs,
bitch, I know what I
Italian,
see on this
and every other Firehouse sub have in common? They're freshly
so
prepared.
So before I go back
toasted.
to Facebook and motherfuckers telling me all that.
Another lying headline about millions of dollars that apparently I have.
He alleged that people who were tied to rip off the Minnesota state welfare system. Do you know what he is referring to?
I really don't, and I don't think the secretary himself understands what he's referring to.
This news just breaking moments ago. Fox News has obtained photos of one of the Somali illegal immigrants wrapped up in the Minnesota fraud scandal, posing with several high-profile Minnesota Democrats, including Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Well, now investigators are tracking illegal immigrants wrapped up in the
He himself understands what he's referring
scheme to rip off news just of the Somali illegal immigrants wrapped up in the Minnesota fraud, including Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Well, now investigators are tracking the whip immigrants wrapped up.
Arguing she is not worth millions, a new financial disclosure found Representative Ilhan Omar's net worth could be as much as $30 million. The vast majority of the money coming from her husband's two companies.
President Trump wants answers. Writing on Truth Social, quote, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is worth over $30 million. There is no way such wealth could have been accumulated legally while being paid the salary of a politician.
Congresswoman, can you tell us what your response is to the Oversight Committee launching it?
Over to the Midwest, specifically over to the.
And of course, you know, what is not, you know, he's clearly trying to not mention is the fact that we know at least some of the people that have been implicated in this were political allies, political supporters of both Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar.
What do you guys make?
Imagine nearly $1 billion vanishing from a program meant to feed America's most vulnerable children. It's one of the largest pandemic-era fraud cases in US history. But this isn't just a domestic crime story. The money trail didn't stop in Minneapolis. It crossed an ocean, landed in East Africa, and funded luxury homes and real estate in a country thousands of miles away, Kenya. This is the story of how a massive fraud scheme in Minnesota became an international money laundering scandal. Welcome to Financial Alien News, and today we're diving into the heart of the scandal that has rocked the Somali American community in Minnesota and drawn the attention of the White House and international investigators. We'll trace the cash, name the key players, and show you why Nairobi's real estate market became the perfect hiding spot for stolen taxpayer money. The core of this controversy is the Feeding Our Future scheme, which exploited temporary, relaxed oversight of federal child nutrition programs during the pandemic between 2020 and 2022. Non-profit organizations in Minnesota, which is home to the largest Somali population in the US, were reimbursed by the US government for providing meals to low-income children. But prosecutors say the operation was a massive sham. Individuals linked to these non-profits allegedly defrauded US taxpayers of almost $1 billion. Instead of feeding hungry kids, the funds were used for personal gain. 86 people have been charged in connection with multiple fraud schemes. Federal investigators were stunned to find the fraud proceeds didn't stay within the US. Prosecutors say the stolen money was laundered and used to purchase houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya. A key piece of evidence, the indictment of a 28-year-old Kenyan citizen, Ahmed Naji Maalim Aftin Sheikh, who was charged with conspiracy to commit international money laundering. Sheikh is the 74th defendant in the Feeding Our Future case. He allegedly received millions of dollars from his brother, Abdiaziz Farah, who was convicted of orchestrating a separate $40 million theft of federal funds. This case highlights a major problem: the vulnerability of Nairobi's property market to cross-border illicit financial flows. The allegations have added urgency to Kenya's recent efforts to tighten its anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing laws. The political fallout was immediate and intense. President Donald Trump, citing the fraudulent money laundering activity, announced the immediate termination of the Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, for Somali nationals in Minnesota. He accused Somali gangs of terrorizing residents and ripping off Minnesota of billions of dollars. However, this move drew sharp criticism. Critics point out that TPS affects only about 700 people nationwide, while nearly all the defendants in the major fraud cases are American citizens. Community leaders emphasize that the vast majority of Somali Americans are honest, law-abiding citizens who came to the US in search of a better life. They have been appalled by members of their own community who preyed upon the very programs meant to help low-income Minnesotans. The Minnesota fraud cases are a stark example of a domestic scheme morphing into a global scandal, with stolen taxpayer money fueling a property boom thousands of miles away. While Kenyan authorities have not yet responded to the claims, the investigation is ongoing and more cases are expected as authorities trace the money flow both within the US and overseas. What do you think should be done to stop this kind of cross-border money laundering? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to stay updated on how this international investigation develops, hit that like button.
I also want to announce some updates in the fraud scheme, or the scheme to defraud the Early Intensive Development and Behavior Intervention for Autism program, another Medicaid program here in the state of Minnesota. Today we unsealed charges against the second defendant charged in the case, Abdi Najib Hassan Youssef, who owns Star Autism Center in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Mr. Youssef, like others involved in the autism scheme, paid kickbacks to parents to have their children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and enrolled to receive EIDVI services at his autism center. Based on these fraudulent claims for services that were not provided, and in many cases were not needed, he received more than $6 million in Medicaid funds. He used some of those proceeds to purchase a semi-truck for $100,000, and he also sent more than $200,000 to Kenya. Earlier this morning at 10:30, the first defendant charged in the autism fraud scheme, Asha Farah Hassan, pled guilty. As you may recall, Ms. Farah was the owner of Smart Therapy LLC, a Minneapolis-based autism clinic. Through her clinic, she participated in both a scheme to defraud the EIDVI program, as well as a scheme to fraudulently obtain federal child nutrition program funds under the sponsorship of Feeding Our Future. Through these fraud schemes, Ms. Hassan received more than $14 million in Medicaid payments, and more than $450,000 in federal child nutrition program funds, of which she sent at least hundreds of thousands of dollars to Kenya, which were used to purchase real estate.
The Asset Recovery Agency will be engaged from the point of seizure, and all assets used or acquired through these activities, including cash, vehicles, land, buildings, and businesses, will be treated as proceeds of crime, promptly frozen, prosecuted, forfeited to the state, and redirected.
Somali people, you must tell us where you're getting this money. Oh, I was in Isli. I went to Isli for a business meeting with a client at the BBS Mall, guys. And the beautiful high-rise apartments under construction I saw in Isli. People have money in Isli. Somali people, please tell us the secret. After finishing my business meeting with the client from the BBS Mall, I decided to take a walk around Isli. And I can tell you, every street in Isli right now has more than 10 buildings under construction. You will see these buildings covered with nets and under construction and not yet complete, or at least it recently completed. High-rise apartments, I'm talking about high-rise apartments. That is apartments with 10 floors and above. I mean, every street. And remember, Isli has 12 streets. First street, second street, all the way to 12. And every street has like 10 high-rise apartments under construction or recently finished construction. I mean, guys, I decided to take a walk around Isli so I can show you this, man. Somali people have money. These people have money. I don't know what they do, how they do it. I think they're trying to make Isli a city of its own in Nairobi, man. If you come to Isli directly without going through Nairobi CBD, man, you may think this is Nairobi, man. You may think this is the CBD, guys. Like, just this street alone, you can see over 5 buildings, high-rise, covered with nets, meaning under construction. Look, there's one here, there's this one here, there's another one there, that is 5. And it's this, all these streets all over Isli have at least 6, 7, 8, or even 10 buildings, high-rise buildings under construction, man. Isli, man, you have to tell us where you're getting this money, Somali people. What? And one thing I've realized, guys, if you want to do mjengo construction or your friend or stuff like that, go to Isli. Utawai kosa kazi. You will always get a job because there's building every corner under construction. Where?
That money in Minnesota that they scammed, you know where it went to? They brought up city blocks in Eastleigh, Nairobi, Kenya. Check this out.
Somali people, you must tell us where you're getting this money. And I can tell you, every street in Isli right now has more than 10 buildings under construction. You will see these buildings covered with nets and under construction and not yet complete, or at least it recently completed. Every street. And remember, Isli has 12 streets. First street, second street, all the way to 12. And every street has like 10 high-rise apartments under construction or recently finished construction. Somali people have money. These people have money. I don't know what they do, how they do it. I think they're trying to make Isli a city of its own in Nairobi, man.
He said buildings, like blocks of high-rise buildings being constructed. And that video is from 2023. Oh, where did all the money come from? Well, that money came from Minnesota, buddy. That's where all the money went, to buy up city blocks of high-rise apartments and business complexes. You see, they making that into a little Somalia right there in Kenya. That's where majority of the money went.
Breaking news, over $250 million was stolen from U.S. government and it was spent on Kenya's real estate. All this happened in Minnesota. So during pandemic, the U.S. government gave out money to feed the hungry children and also all those people that they were going through a lot since nobody was working during pandemic. But instead of these people to do what they were supposed to, they used the taxpayers' money to buy their own properties. And even one of these people, he bought his own airplane. And all these properties is in Kenya. So according to some information, they had someone in Kenya who was helping them to buy all the properties that they needed in the prime area, like in Donho, Eastleigh, in Parklands, in Diani, and also they bought some lands in Tiani. Kenya is also facing criticism because they have refused to investigate and arrest all those people that they were involved, all those people that helped these people to buy the properties in Kenya. FBI is going to seize the properties, and this is going to do a lot of damage in Kenya's economy and also real estate owners, developers, and even banks. These people, they hid the stolen money by buying properties in Kenya, so this is how they were able to launder this money.
Billions of dollars were frauded from Minnesota, United States, and invested in Nairobi, Kenya. Major breaking news. United States authorities are literally planning to move to Kenya and seize properties that were purchased using the money that was frauded in Minnesota, whereby, according to reports, we are getting the money bought a jet, luxury apartment and resorts across Nairobi. And according to reports that this particular money were for the taxpayers, whereby the Somalians in the United States were actually saying that they have daycares that are taking care of their kids, and according to reports and investigation and everything, there are no kids in those daycares. Everything has been exposed, and this is how Kenya is literally linked with this particular Minnesota fraud. Number one, Kenyan passports were literally sold to the Somalians, whereby the Somalians went ahead and married their relatives to actually secure the United States entry, whereby they actually ran massive housing and health care fraud scenes in Minnesota, whereby the money was actually stolen and packed in Kenya through real estates. And this is why the United States authorities are ready to land in Kenya for further investigation.
I hope as we speak today that we all know Minneapolis, Minnesota has been ripped of more than $9 billion taxpayers' funds. And the bigger question we've been asking ourselves is, where is this money being taken always? Where are this money always laundered to or channeled to? Really, let's watch this clip, and in the end I'll come up with my commentary for the same. Let's dive in.
All right, now the FBI are now targeting Kenyan properties worth 39 billion Kenya shillings, which are suspected to be proceeds of what you will call the Minnesota scam. Of course, you understand that there was a scam going on in Minnesota, and we'll be giving you more stories on that very soon as they unfold. Stay tuned.
My learned suspects, you have seen that stealing is not a religious thing. Christians can steal, and now the Islamic religion has shown us that they are expert in that area. Those people who are in Minnesota, a few of them, the Somalis who are in Minnesota, were able to steal up to 40 billion Kenya shillings, and they channeled that money here in Kenya for them to be able to do real estate. And today, as we speak, the FBI is in the country trying to locate that money and knowing where this money was invested. I know they are going to do a very good job, and we are going to get a report very soon. And this report will not only expose the real estate industry, it's going to expose a lot of other industry, like the ID industry, the registration of persons industry. I'm telling you, it's going to expose a lot of things. And here is a catch-22. The catch-22 is, we saw the president of United States giving us 2.5 billion the other day, money to be invested in our health system. If we do not comply with the investigations for them to recover the 40 billion Kenya shillings that was stolen from the United States, then they are not going to send the 2.5 billion dollars that they had given us for our systems. And I think the government of Kenya needs to cooperate with the FBI. They need to show them where this money was being invested for them to be able to get the money and go out as soon as possible.
This is for entertainment purposes only, so family. Am I the only one who's a little disturbed at the possibility that the divided states could actually own half of Nairobi? Like, have you guys been following the Minnesota tax heist? Because you know the thing is, okay, when I was in Nairobi recently, I I was going around just the city, doing things, fun times, and I was just like shocked at the number of Somalis I saw around. And no hate, no shade for Somalis, you know what I mean? And like, I went to Arboretum a couple of times. It would be like 10 Kenyans and like 200 Somali women or whatever, and maybe 20 Somali guys. But I was just like, what's going on? And guys are like, no, a lot of people have moved into apartments nowadays, so this is one of the only parks, etc., etc. Guys were just, and I was discussing it with Nairobians. And then I went to BBM and Eastleigh and stuff, and I was like, what? It was insane, like that mall and just the infrastructure. If you were in Eastleigh 5 years ago and you went today, you'd be like, what? And then I remembered those stories we used to hear back in the day. If you ever had a rela who lived in South B or South C and owned their house, and how the Somalis came and they would offer them like 60, 70 million for a house that was maybe at the most worth like maybe 15 million. And so like guys were always talking about like how they're coming after our neighborhoods. There's even like a pastor, this one that did the Nene, what's his name? Kula. Pastor Kula had also warned Kenyans about how, people need to keep their homes and there's going to be an invasion. You know how our pastors are, all the Muslim conspiracy, what. Turns out that all this stuff was probably bought with, a lot of it, let's say like that, allegedly, was bought with taxpayers or, I don't know, US citizens' funds. And now the divided states is coming back for their property, and apparently they're going to start seizing some of these properties in South B, South C, Eastleigh, Diani, most of Nairobi, that were built or were bought with these funds. So, as in, if you see this thing clearly, I return to the question that I started with, family. What if Trump's America actually owns half of Nairobi?
So we have some major developing news coming from the United States of America. The United States of America is very serious about the Somalis living in America, and they are accusing the Somali of taking the money meant for the poor people to buy a lot of property, not in any other country, but in Kenya. According to the reports, they were filing cases in which they were receiving funds for the poor people and children with autism, and all this money, about $1 billion US, was being used to buy luxurious properties in Kenya. They are also saying that this money was going to the terrorist group in Somali, and this is how they have been funding their lifestyles in this East African country known as Kenya. And this is why Donald Trump is very bitter with the people of Somali. He's saying that they do not contribute anything, they only take the taxpayers' money, and also file asylum, saying that in their country there is a lot of trouble, and that is why they have run to the United States of America. And in that case, all the funds they are receiving, they are using them to buy a lot of property, a lot of lands, opening big businesses in Kenya. And that is why the President of the United States of America is very much willing to ensure that all these Somalis, about 80,000 living in Minnesota, are deported back to their country. So we have some major developing news. The United States of America is now conducting an investigation to show how the Somalis in the United States of America in Minnesota were stealing government money, and all this money was being sent to one African country known as Kenya, where they were making a lot of progress and where they were buying a lot of property and businesses from this money that they were swindling the United States of America government. According to reports, these people opened hundreds of schools, hundreds of daycares, and so many businesses that were being funded by the government. We are talking about $9 billion US that has already been swindled by the Somalis living in the United States of America. All these daycares, all these schools had no children, and they were receiving funds from the government. One school which had registered over 102 students was found not to have even a single student, and when they were asked, they are closing the doors and they don't want to speak to anybody. Even the people who are working on these daycares say that this was a total scam, and this is why the United States of America is very serious about the Somalis living in the United States of America, in that they have taken a lot of money, and all this money cannot be seen where it is going. According to reports, these people are buying a lot of properties. They are very rich in Kenya, and many people were wondering where they are getting all this money, and they are not even working. It is now turning out that these people were having one of the biggest scams, using even their representative in the government in the United States of America, Ilhan Omar. You should watch that documentary and see. So we have some major breaking news. The president of Kenya, William Ruto, has just come out and said that the government is ready to work with the United States of America to ensure that the United States of America recovers its assets that was stolen by the Somalis living in the United States of America. According to the latest news, all the money that was being stolen by the Somalis in the United States of America in Minnesota was being invested in Kenya, and they were buying a lot of property, a lot of land, a lot of businesses, and many people are wondering, where is all this money coming from? It is now turning out that they were opening schools in Minnesota which were receiving a lot of money from the government, and yet there were no students. There were a lot of daycares registered with over 100 students, and yet there were no children in those daycares. A lot of scam was happening inside Minnesota. According to the United States of America government, this money amounts to over $9 billion US, and all this money was buying a lot of land in Kenya and a lot of assets, and these people were living their life to the fullest, and people were wondering. But of course, the United States of America noticed that through YouTubers and so many other people. Now the government of Kenya has come out and said that they are going to have an asset recovery. They're going to seize all the property, all the lands and everything, and they're going to sell and return the money to the United States of America. The big question is, what do you think?
Believe me when I say this, don't envy every rich man or woman that you come across, because most of it is ill-gotten wealth. Let's have a look at this cover of the Daily Nation, for example, and I quote, 39 billion scam, US agents target Kenyan properties. On to the subheader, payback. Payback since 2022, Kenya has featured in courts in the US state of Minnesota during a 39 billion corruption trial. Masterminds of the COVID-era scandal invested part of the cash stolen from the US taxpayers in Kenya, buying high-end apartments and luxury resorts. Now, with their conviction, US authorities are on the trail of the ill-gotten wealth. And you can see an individual called Abdiaziz Farah, Abdimajid Noor, Mukhtar Sharif, Hayat Noor, and Mohammed Ismail. Then right next to Mohammed Ismail, there's another text which reads, Karibu Palms Resort in Diani, which convict Liban Alishire bought using part of his stolen 315 million. He agreed to surrender the property. So let me explain how this scam works. Picture this. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when schools were closed and fear was everywhere, the US government released emergency funds meant for hungry children. The program was called Feeding Our Future. It was meant to be a simple, noble cause where the US government gave out meals to low-income kids because they could no longer eat at school under shutdown. Now here's where the plot thickens. Some goons from Minnesota came up with a non-profit organization called Feeding Our Future. And guess what? The state of Minnesota trusted those goons to oversee millions of dollars from the federal child nutrition program. And instead of distributing food, the Feeding Our Future non-profit started approving fake food sites which claimed to be feeding thousands of children every day. In some sites, they claimed to be serving 3,000 meals, 5,000 meals, or even 10,000 meals daily. But in reality, there were no children and there was no food. It was all just a big scam. Now in comes the second question. Where did the money go to? First up, right here in Nairobi, Kenya, a high-rise apartment building was purchased, specifically in the South Sea neighborhood near Nairobi National Park. According to the DOJ, Department of Justice, that is, another defendant bought an aircraft in Nairobi using the same funds. You go to Diani, another one of these shifty individuals allegedly wired $216,000 towards purchasing Karibu Palms Resort in Diani Beach, just right next to the Indian Ocean. Still on the US Department of Justice report, some of the funds also used to buy land in Mandera town along the border with Somalia and Ethiopia. Again, let me reiterate, don't envy wealthy men and women. For some of them, we just never know how they came about those funds. These are people who are going to scam taxpayers abroad to then come and wash the money in this country. You have heard of South Sea, you have heard of Diani, you've heard of Mandera town. Others are even buying planes and they're chartering them to us. These are some of the things which need to be recouped by the US and Kenyan government, sold, and then we share the spoils. Sababu hii pesa hatuwezi rudishia wa America much as ni yao. The crime was committed on both countries. The funds were stolen in America, invested in Kenya. We will seize them, sell them, tukatane katikati nusu-nusu, because that is what they would have done in America anyway. I don't think they'd send it all the way back to Kenya if at all. And this is what's going on in this country, left, right, center. Scammers si wale pekee wako Minnesota. Even this housing program, kuna watu wanakulia illegally. Overpricing cement, overpricing chuma ya D10, D12, D8, overpricing BRT. Everything is through the roof for the sake of somebody getting kickbacks and stealing from the nation. As we deal with these people who stole from America, we must also ask ourselves, who are these people who are currently stealing from this republic? Because pia wale wanaiba Kenya ni exchange program. Hawa wanaiba huko wanaleta hapa. Wetu wanaiba hapa wanapeleka Dubai na kwingine. So we must also start looking into that. But anywho guys, let's see what Kenyans on X had to say about this. And I quote, Brian Okello said, from Minnesota to Minnesota. Well said, Brian. Godfrey Mugambi said, was just wondering how a Somali president could come open a big mall in Isili in the company of Duale, who has become very arrogant of late. He has kept very silent on this matter. Serikali ya majambazi ikiongozwa na jambazi. Combo Steve said, the US government itabidi ianze kushindana na boma yangu kuuza nyumba. The Kenyan property market is saturated with overpriced houses. Information Technology said, USA does not play with taxpayer funds. They have the reach and means to claw back their money. Sir Isaac Newton said, in the same way that funds meant for development in Mandera, Wajir, Isiolo finds its way to Isli. Ironically, Isli was never mentioned in this report, but that's an interesting tweet right there. Gatonga Kairu said that 9 billion is just a drop in the ocean, literally. The fraud must be quite extensive. If the US authorities dig a little deeper, the entire of South B, C, and Parklands will suddenly become empty shells. Selector Physicus said, wakifukuzwa US watakuja Kenya. Please be vigilant. Nchi yetu isiwe another Nigeria, Sudan, ama Lebanon.
Welcome back to In Between Blacks and Whites, and I'm your host James. Yesterday, before we welcomed a new year 2026, the Kenyan President William Ruto said that he will collaborate with the US government, the FBI, so that they may get these perpetrators of this money laundering scheme that has been happening here in Kenya. First of all, there are some people who were arrested in the United States, and the funds were traced that they turned their funds here in Kenya to do certain activities, such as some bought lands in the Diani Beach, and another one bought a land in Mandera, and another used some of his funds in real estates, such a way that they build the skyscrapers that you normally see here in Nairobi. And the Kenyan president said that he'll collaborate with the US governments so that all these funds that have been used in money laundering here in Kenya, to launder the United States funds that have been stolen, to be returned where they are supposed to be used.
Soon and very soon, the American government and the FBI will be landing in Kenya. Yes, and they will be coming to arrest some Somalis who frauded the American government of 250 billion US dollars. You understand? So these Somalis kumbe wanakuwaga fraudsters. Unaona, wamejenga manyumba refu refu, wamejenga ploti zingine mingi mingi, kumbe hii pesa inakuwaga pesa ya kuoshwa ama pesa ya kuibwa. That is what is now turning out. Walidanganya the government of America huko Minnesota that wanataka pesa ya kwenda kusaidia watu. Kumbe hizi pesa waliziturn na waka-invest into real estate. So let us wait for the American government and the FBI to come and collect these crooks and take them back to where? To America, because I know they'll be charged in America.
Believe me when I say this, don't envy every rich man or woman that you come.
Refugees who come here under the alleged plight of asylum and fleeing.
Specifically in neighborhoods like Eastleigh and South.
I gotta stop because something wrong with this sound. Let me see. That's a secret. I think I should end that video.